of being at all 10, in part because I also had the honor of leading the U.S. delegation to both phases of WSIS in 2003 and 2005, and it's from the 2005 WSIS that the IGF was born. It has, I think, exceeded everyone's expectations when it was first created. It was very unclear if anyone would be interested in coming to such an event, since it's a non-decision-making event, and it's one in which sharing is the primary goal. I'm particularly pleased that you all are here because you already know what the primary theme of this year's IGF is, and I'm sure you all are thinking about various programs that you've seen that are of interest to you because of things you do back at home. Let me suggest that the value of this program may be to entice you to go to something that you didn't think that you wanted to listen to and to participate in. I have found over the years that I learn the most by going to those panels and talking to those people who I don't expect to talk to and to listen to and to discuss issues. That's how I learn, and I suggest that's how many do. So with that very brief introduction, Bertrand, you're going to go first. We're only going to allow people to speak for about 2 or 3 minutes, so as to give time for you all in the audience to think of questions that our very esteemed panel may be able to help you with. With that, Bertrand.
Thank you very much, David. The thread that I'm supposed to address is cybersecurity. I don't have to set up the scene on all the different topics that you normally put behind cybersecurity. There are several sessions that will be dealing with this thing. The thing that I would like to highlight is something that is not present as such in the agenda, but that is actually percolating through the agenda, which I would call human security. The security of networks is important. Cyber wars, any other things that we deal with are very important. But I sense that in the numerous workshops, and I can give you the numbers, there's a thread that connects human security in terms of daily life and issues of freedom of expression in everything that is related from hate speech, harassment, violence against women, and the tension that the online platforms that we have all benefited from and we all benefit from, the challenges that they raise now because the abuses on those platforms are infringing on individual security and individual harm. And we are confronted with very difficult choices on how to combine this with the absolute desire and need to defend freedom of expression. And I would encourage you to go and look at a certain number of workshops, 151, 159, 125, 196, 98, 158, and 128 on, for instance, blasphemy policies, or dangerous speech online, or tech-related gender violence and freedom of expression. When governments hit like on the war on terror. We're in an environment where the restrictions on freedom of expression are now in situations where sometimes they are legitimate and sometimes they are used as an alibi, or those circumstances are used as an alibi to repress dissent. So I just would like to encourage you on the thread of cybersecurity to think also about human security and the challenges that we all have to solve, and this place is an amazing place to discuss those issues that we don't necessarily connect with security. We sometimes talk about cybersecurity and privacy. Cybersecurity and freedom of expression is already something that is a thread through several workshops. That's all I wanted to highlight.
Thank you very much, Bertrand, and I appreciate the brevity of your intervention. Hassan and Michael, you talk a little bit about internet economy, please. Hassan.
Okay. My name is Hossein El Gamal, and I'm a MAG member. I'm a board member of AFICTA, so representing Africa businesses, and also I'm one of the leadership team in ICC basis. Our session, I'm personally very much fascinated about it. I hope many of you will be. I was always dreaming of having such a session relating internet and sustainable development. And especially for developing countries, this is extremely important. This is what we are looking for. Everything else is to provide the infrastructure and bring things together to the developing world. But then, how we are going to achieve the sustainable development? What examples did we have? How can we replicate such examples? What can we see in the future mapping the work in internet development in ways objectives with the sustainable development goals? So in fact, our session is based on a few papers. One of them is from ISOC. We have Constance with us today who had this paper, and it helped a lot shaping this session. We have also articles from about the development digital divide by Carl Bildt, the former foreign minister from Sweden. We have from the UN Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We have from Business Ericsson and Earth Institute Information Technology, key to achieve new UN Sustainable Development Goals, and many others. The session will be split into three areas. First one is talking about the vision. Where are we going to in 2030? How are we going to map our internet and ICTs with sustainable development? And then we are going to talk about examples, practices that took place between different entities. We have seen things in Africa very amazing about using internet for e-learning, about using internet for mobile health application that help fight epidemic diseases, about e-health, about diagnosing and treatment. So many cases would be discussed. And towards the end, we will try to identify ways of moving forward and seeing how IGF would also help in achieving sustainable development goals. Many diversified participants are coming from intergovernmental. We have the UNESCO, we have WIPO, we have UNDESA.
I think we need to move quickly.
Okay, so I can move. Thank you.
My job, as you can tell, is to keep the panel moving here, despite the richness of all the presentations. Michael?
All right, I'll do my best. So I'm Michael Kendi, the Chief Economist with the Internet Society, and I'll talk briefly about the Internet economy set of workshops. There's 15 workshops in that set. So just 2 seconds of background. I mean, the Internet now in the G20 countries accounts for 5% of the economy of the G20. It's about $5 trillion. And that's just direct income out of the internet, but it's also a general purpose technology, as we say, that impacts all sectors. So just to use one example, today, and it would have been hard to predict just 5 years ago, the largest taxi company in the world doesn't own any taxis and doesn't have any drivers. The largest hotel chain, or one of the largest, doesn't own any real estate. So really just impacts on all sectors and creating some real uncertainties about regulation, jobs, and a whole host of issues. So really, if I look at the panels, and I'll just run through them briefly, you can divide them into 3 groups. First, the digital divide, making sure that everybody has access to the economic benefits that the internet can provide and that the internet is widely available everywhere. Secondly, how the internet is being used is still a significant topic relating to content and other forms of usage. And finally, the broader economic impact. So on the digital divide, there's a couple panels on infrastructure issues, who's going to pay for it, how's it going to be rolled out, how is it going to be used efficiently is another set on interconnection and IXPs. And then an area that's now growing in importance is local content and data centers to host it as a way of making the internet relevant for everybody and bringing everyone online. Second, in terms of usage, there's sessions on content, copyright, one on intermediate liability. There's issues around the economic impact of trust. If you don't trust the internet, stop using it, that'll have issues. And one on mobile payments, how people are using their mobiles. Finally, the broader economic impacts. There's one on jobs. Actually, it took place this morning already. Always a key topic. What is the internet doing to jobs and income inequality? There's one on taxation. So if you want to find out what the double Irish Dutch sandwich is, there's a topic with that exact title. And finally, there's one on the trade issues because of the international nature of the internet and how people can use it across borders. So as an economist, I'm glad to see this huge depth and breadth of these topics, and hope all of you can take part in at least one or two of these workshops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're now going to go to the inclusiveness and diversity subgrouping. We have Raul and the Deputy Minister from Afghanistan, Mohammed Marjan.
Thank you, Ambassador Gross. First of all, I would like to wish a very good afternoon to you all. I have been given the topic of the sub-theme of inclusiveness and diversity. In broad terms, diversity is anything in any dimension that can be used to differentiate groups and people from one another. It means respect for and appreciation of differences in ethnicity, gender, age, national origin, disability, sexual orientation, education, and religion. Now, anything which brings uniqueness to the table is basically diverse. And it is basically these forces which we need to harness. We need to harness diverse forces. And that is the precise reason why diversity and inclusion both are very important. So to begin with, I would like to give you a quick overview of the types of sessions that address the sub-theme of inclusiveness and diversity. They range from the impact of civil society on internet governance to enhancing gender participation within the IGFs. There are sessions dealing with newer issues such as zero rating and net neutrality, and sessions dealing with issues that have existed since the inception of the IGF, such as the developing world in internet governance. And finally, there are issues of general applicability, such as principles of online participation, and there are specialized issues such as universal applicability of documentary history. Other topics within the sub-themes of inclusiveness and diversity include universal acceptance and open educational resources. Inclusiveness and diversity are important themes in the developing world, especially and in India. At present, they are key objectives of Digital India, the government's flagship program for digital inclusion. Digital India aims at inclusive growth by ensuring that every village has broadband internet connectivity by way of a fiber optic backbone terminating at over 300,000 gram panchayats, which roughly translate to clusters of villages. Now, when it comes to diversity, there are, of course, very few countries that can rival India in terms of any parameter of diversity. Picking just one language, Digital India has already made India's IDN cctld.bharat operational. In the first phase, it is available in the Devanagari script, which represents over 8 languages. Plans are already underway to make it available in at least 6 more scripts, representing a number of Indian languages. In addition to ccTLD operations, a simultaneous effort is underway to promote local language content. So inclusiveness and diversity are therefore key aspects which we need to be sort of bothered about and concerned with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Good afternoon. A couple of years back, I was in one of the forums, and a participant from the forum put a question that in the offline world, I know my nationality. But when I'm online, then what is my nationality? Because when we are online, we forget about that who is from which country, because we belong to one internet. Now, the inclusiveness and diversity, which one of the sub-themes of IGF, I think we have to work for the agenda, we have to work for this sub-theme, because when we belong to one nation, online nation, then imagine the challenges when we are in offline world in one country and we have the problems and differences in diversities in the area of religion, and the way my colleague just mentioned, languages, ethnicities. So what happens when we get into a much more bigger platform? I think the IGF in forum like this should find mechanisms and answers for that, so that we, everyone, enjoy this one nation, and be not, there should be no differences. That is one of the questions that IGF or platforms like IGF or Net Mondial should find answers for, and the policies should be put together in a manner that we should be able to take care of all those who are part of this nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Our next topic is openness, and no one is better qualified to talk about openness or virtually any of the other topics than Vince Cerf. Vince?
Thank you very much. Let me start out by observing that almost every session in this IGF has some element of openness associated with it. The internet starts out with a very open network layered architecture. It's open to changes in its protocols, open to changes in the underlying transmission technology, and certainly open to the variety of applications that can be placed on top of that infrastructure. It's also made use of an open standards development process. Anyone is allowed to show up and participate. You can't even join the Internet Engineering Task Force. All you can do is show up. And if your ideas are considered worthy, then people will follow them, otherwise they won't. It's also open to access to all of its resources. It's intended to be an end-to-end platform that allows anyone to get from one place to another in the net. It's made use of transparent and multi-stakeholder policy development, and I think that's a fundamental aspect of the Internet's success so far. It's given the freedom for people to invent, implement, and operate any piece of the Internet. We call this permissionless innovation, and it's certainly made a big difference. And this comment about languages, there are two things going on here. One is support for all languages, or most of them anyway, using Unicode, both in the domain name system and in the World Wide Web in general. But then to get back to the oneness of all this, companies like Google and others are getting better and better at translating from one language to another to at least help us feel like we're part of one common environment. So, Mr. Ambassador, I'll stop there and say that open is worth preserving.
Well, words to live by. Thank you very much, Vin. Next, we're going to talk about enhancing the multi-stakeholder cooperation. We have Peter Major, and we owe Peter a great debt of gratitude as chair of the United Nations CSTD. He has helped shepherd the importance in a multilateral institution of the multi-stakeholder process. Peter?
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm not going to talk about in detail about the CSTD work. I just want to, since this is a setting the scene session, and I think there are some newcomers. So basically, I would like to talk about what has been already said, that is the multi-stakeholder attendance of this event of the IGF, where we kind of take it granted that governments, representatives, business, civil society, technical community, academia, and international organizations are attending or participating in this meeting. And basically, when I first came to the IGF, I was really surprised that there was no difference. You can go to anyone and you can start a conversation with anyone, so it's really exciting. So IGF is a very good example of the multi-stakeholder participation. Now, how we can improve or enhance the cooperation between the players. My advice to you is to participate in as many sessions as you can and engage in discussions. And if you don't feel shy, first of all. Ask questions, and your questions will be answered. There are no stupid questions. Get engaged in discussions, and lastly, but you should also think about the future, how you can contribute in this very, very exciting environment. So just a few words about the multi-stakeholder approach in the UN environment. Ambassador was referring to some working groups I have been chairing. We tried to eliminate the differences, and that is all the participants were treated on equal footing in the working groups. And it is very difficult, of course, but it's doable. So what I hope that this will have some kind of impact on the whole system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to turn to the Internet and human rights, one of the core issues for all of us here at the IGF. Patrick and Sonia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Human rights online have become a key aspect of Internet governance. It is also becoming one of the most urgent aspects, considering that many governments are moving rapidly to limit free expression on the Internet, the right to privacy, as well as the right to assembly and the right for association online. Just to give you some baseline data, according to research done by Freedom House, the organization that I work for, over 60% of all Internet users live in countries where criticism of the government, of military or ruling family has been subject to censorship. Another statistic, over 58% of Internet users live in countries where bloggers or ICT users were jailed for sharing content on political, social, and religious issues. And over 45% live in countries where posting satirical videos or cartoons meant to make fun of the government or social conditions in a country can result in censorship or jail time. These numbers have been growing from year to year, reflecting the urgency of discussing this situation on a global scale. As such, freedom of expression online will be one of the key issues brought up in the next few days. Another important aspect that will be discussed is the right to privacy in the face of growing surveillance. In the post-Snowden environment, the world was outraged about the NSA practices. Instead of using it as a learning moment, it seems like many governments, both democratic and non-democratic, have instead moved to both increase their surveillance authority through new legal measures, as well as obtain new equipment that would make that surveillance possible. In fact, when we look at 65 countries that Freedom House recently audited in terms of Internet freedom, about half of them have passed new laws increasing surveillance over the past 3 years. Another aspect of the surveillance debate will deal with the questions of encryption. In a landmark report released in May of this year, UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression, David Kay, underlined how encryption and anonymity are crucial to securing freedom of opinion and expression, and the right to privacy. He emphasized that any restriction must be narrowly tailored to achieve legitimate aims. Unfortunately, governments around the world have moved to limit encryption and undermine anonymity for all Internet users.
Thank you, Sanya. All very, very important issues. We just want to keep time for questions and interventions from the floor. Thank you.
Patrick?
Well, I won't add much. Over lunch, I had a discussion with some people representing academia, and they said, well, haven't we or aren't we focusing too much on human rights issues? Has the Tunis agenda too much been set around human rights, and aren't we progressing altogether in this direction that freedom of expression and other human rights issues are being protected online as they are offline? I must say that I slightly disagree with them. I come from a different background. That is the Council of Europe, a multilateral organization which has a very strong multi-stakeholder background as well. And in policy development, we find that extremely important. But what we see, when we say we speak too much about human rights, maybe we need to make it more clear what we understand. Have we progressed in terms of available, accessible, affordable internet? Have we done away with restrictions on internet content? By states or by private companies? Have we done away with blocking filtering of internet content? Have we done away with blocking access to use of social media or blanket blockage of social media? Have we done away with control by internet intermediaries on the users, on the end users? I don't think so. I think the issue of human rights, especially for a Council of Europe, multilateral, intergovernmental organization, remains crucial. And I think the issues that are going to be debated on mass surveillance, privacy issues, data protection, journalistic freedom, gender issues, minority issues, free speech, freedom of expression, they're all crucial to us. I think it's not up to the journalists and those that want to express themselves to defend themselves. It is up to this community to stand up and create the basis for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would note that gender is a particularly important issue that has underlined many of the sessions here. And that's something that's really come to the fore most recently. Critical internet resources, Byron and Paul. Paul, Byron looks to you.
Or maybe I'll get going while you figure it out.
Enhance
Okay,
cooperation by borrowing the mic. Go ahead.
I'll jump in and prove the redundancy of this whole environment. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. This is my 8th IGF, which still seems amazing to say that, but I thought there was an interesting parallel. The first time I went to an IGF in Hyderabad and had the opportunity to speak on a panel, it was on critical internet resources, sort of bookended over the 10-year lifespan of the IGF. And I find it particularly interesting because at that time when we talked about critical internet resources, that term came loaded with all kinds of meaning. And as we've progressed over those 10 years, I would say it has evolved over time. And in particular for those of us from the operator community, and I'm part of the country code operators community and run .ca for Canada. What we think of in terms of critical internet resources may be slightly different often than what gets bantied about in the halls of UN environments, but they are certainly related. And I would take the opportunity to raise a couple here today. One is with regards to the IANA oversight transition process that ICANN has been shepherding, and also the ICANN accountability process that's related to it. When we think about critical internet resources and we think about the namespace and the number space, which Paul can talk about more in a moment, those are the types of critical internet resources where there was concern about how they were being administered and who had oversight to administer them. And part of what we have been doing in the ICANN space is to truly internationalize the administration and coordination of that. And we are in the very, very short strokes right now of actually fulfilling the goals and desires of the broader community to do exactly that. The IANA transition proposal is already out there and done. The ICANN accountability proposal will be with us shortly, and hopefully at that time we will truly internationalize those critical internet resources. The other area that I would just bring to your attention, oh, and by the way, there are a couple of sessions on that, 163 and 72, for those of you who have not been buried in all things IANA, that's where you can catch up quickly. The other piece of critical internet resource that I think about as an operator is internet exchange points, and how these simple, low-cost, member, community-based entities can make a massive difference to the internet in everybody's country, region, locality, by dramatically improving the performance, redundancy, resiliency, bringing content local, and also capacity building as you get the local community members to drive the internet exchange points. And whether it's a developing nation or a developed nation, we all have stories and benefits that we can bring to the other party around internet exchange points. There are a couple of really interesting sessions there, and of course I'm highly conflicted because I'm chairing one of them, but 171 tomorrow and 201 on Friday will be both very interesting sessions around all things internet exchange point.
Thank you. Paul.
First. Okay.
It's you, not the equipment.
Paul Wilson here from APNIC, a member of the Critical Internet Resources community, but I'll keep them both ready. I have to. Once. Sorry. Yes, I'm talking about CIRs, but from a numbering perspective, naturally. I recently worked with a colleague, Pablo, on a chapter of Bill Drake's book, which is in production, marking the 10th anniversary of the WIGIG. That's something that was meant to be published for this IGF, but it's been delayed. It'll be released soon. But in our chapter, we took a look at the evolution of discussions of This is extraordinary. I'll keep my finger on it. Okay. In the chapter that we've written, we track evolution of critical internet resources across the first 9 IGFs. And I think having done that work, it's really clear to us that nowhere in the IGF actually so far has the IGF proven its value more than in this area of critical internet resources, because the handling of CIRs has really demonstrated clearly that what's most critical about the internet should be understood and can be understood through the IGF by all stakeholders who've got a genuine interest. So it's a whole chapter, I won't go into detail, but what we really do is show that, really I think as Byron said, that during the first few IGFs, the CIRs were the focus of a lot of pretty fierce debate. There were a range of issues, a range of contentious issues, including in particular the role of governments, one or many, in the administration of CIRs. And the IGF really served to raise issues and debates, and I think in the first few years to really clear the air. So as the IGF continued from then up to Istanbul, the discussions on CIRs were approached at a much more practical level. Main sessions, hundreds of workshops touching on CIR issues, but the discussions really focused much more on information sharing, on mutual education between the technical and non-technical communities, covering a huge diversity of interest under the CIR banner, top-level domains and internationalised domain names, the exhaustion of IPv4 and the case for IPv6 and the realities of the IPv6 transition, the role of IXPs, the roles of various internet organisations, ICANN and the RARs and others. Very practical issues, and here in João Pessoa it's really great to see that we've got a best practices main session on IPv6, which is a really important thing, but it's again taking a very practical approach. Even the discussions about the IANA transition, I think, are being addressed at a very informative level, a very constructive and helpful level, not as you might expect as some kind of political football, frankly. So I think it's that progression that actually shows that CIRs under IGF have been hugely successful, that CIRs are no less critical today than they were. There's plenty to discuss, but they just don't inspire the same heat and controversy. IGF has really succeeded in promoting awareness and overcoming differences. So I really hope that in other areas too, the same thing is happening, that IGF is providing a safe place where difficult discussions can be held, an open-minded approach can prevail, and we can all gain from that. Just finally, I want to mention one thing, which is that in the research of this chapter, we made great use of the Friends of the IGF website, which is a fantastic archive of basically everything that's happened across the IGF session. So that has been really vital to us in that research, and I really think as IGF continues, that the approach that was taken there, I really hope that it flourishes and becomes a really critical and known resource for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Peter, for using your finger so effectively to keep the microphone on. It shows our openness and inclusivity. And with the Friends of IGF, for those who don't know, on that website they have maybe not all, but virtually transcripts of virtually all of the major sessions of the 10 or the 9 previous IGFs. All right, we're going to go to emerging issues now. Mark?
I'm here today representing Paul Mitchell from Microsoft. I think many of you know him. He has to send his regrets. He won't be in until tomorrow. You can see him then. And so I'm going to limit my comments here about emerging issues to the ones that I'm most directly involved with. For example, the universal acceptance of internationalized domain names and email names. This is an example where we've always had a chicken and egg situation. Where is the market forces to drive this? Where are the government regulations to drive this? And this is an example where never let a good crisis go to waste. ICANN has been creating thousands of new top-level domains, and they were having trouble actually getting software to work with them. And building on that market incentive, we were able to pile on support for IDNs, and from IDNs to internationalized email addresses. And we have some research that indicates, at least in the Middle East, that having native languages leads to more hosting in country. More hosting in country leads to more content created in country and in language. So that's an emerging issue that I would be involved with.
Thank you very much, Mark. Lastly, before we go to the Q&A, so be prepared to come to the microphones in just a few moments. Constance, can you talk to us a little bit about intercessional work here at IGF?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Constance Baumler from the Internet Society. Intercessional work, perhaps in clearer terms, I would say that the main session is called Connecting the Next Billion. It will be held tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the main hall. And during that session, we will gather the leaders who have been working on intercessional work. So just to take a step back, but there has been a call, a consensus from the international community saying that the IGF should evolve and produce more tangible outputs, non-binding outputs, but it should evolve from being simply a talk shop, very useful talk shop where people can connect. But certainly there was appetite to see the IGF evolve towards more tangible outputs. So the MAG, the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, gathered and decided to launch a few tracks of intercessional work. You perhaps have heard of the dynamic coalitions. I will talk here about two other tracks, the best practice forums, and another track called the policy options for connecting the next billion. This year, experts have gathered, worked through webinars, conference calls, and in a very bottom-up, multi-stakeholder fashion have identified issues that they wanted to tackle, with the hope that ahead of the IGF this week, they would have some best practices to share and to present with the community of IGF stakeholders. So in this regard, we have 6 best practices forums this week. How to strengthen multi-stakeholder participation mechanisms, mitigating spam, establishing CSIRTs, countering abuse against women online, creating an enabling environment for IPv6, and another one that was just held this morning, very successful, how to create enabling environments for the establishment of IXPs. These best practice forums, documents, have been shared during 90-minute sessions, and tomorrow will be presented by their expert leaders and connecting the result with the overall goal of connecting the next billion, explaining why it is critical to have IPv6 to connect the next billion, and so on and so forth, the different themes. The other one that I mentioned, IGF policy options for connecting the next billion. This was an initiative initially launched by business. Business gathered and said, proposed to the MAG to have this work stream on how to collect, propose, compare, and offer to the community a set of policy options that stakeholders, governments could then inspire themselves from. And this draft output document, Policy Options for Connecting the Next Billion, again will be presented tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the main hall, and you're all invited to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Constance. The microphones are now open for questions, comments, and the like. When you come up, please introduce yourself so people know who you are, no matter how well you are known. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, my name is Tony Harris. I'm speaking for the Argentina Internet Association. I may have missed something, but I don't seem to have heard anything about Internet of Things. I mention this because we have a task force set up in Argentina. This is something which intersects with the need for IPv6 deployment, and we are extremely concerned at the lack of readiness in our own market. And since this intersects with civil society and everybody else, I mean, when you think of everything that Internet of Things is going to touch in people's lives, I just wondered if this is on the agenda, and I may have missed it, in which case I apologize.
Well, I'm going to open it up for comments. So I think actually I have not been in a session that hasn't mentioned the Internet of Things so far, but nevertheless, I open it up for those who would like to talk a little.
It's Vince. So, Tony, you're absolutely right. At Google, we have a great interest in that space, and many others do as well. My biggest concerns have to do with safety and security and privacy as those devices are entered into our environment. A great deal of attention is needed also to deal with scaling. Imagine trying to configure hundreds of those things that occupy the house, the car, the office, and maybe things on your person. There is a huge amount of work to be done, and to make matters more complicated, we don't yet have common standards for most of those devices, and so there's going to be a kind of chaotic evolution over the next decade until things settle down and there is common agreement. So there's still an enormous amount of work to be done.
Thank you.
Paul?
Just a quick note that there actually is a dynamic coalition on the Internet of Things, which is active now, and that's I think a high level vote of importance on that particular topic. So if you web search dynamic coalition Internet of Things, you'll find the links quite easily into the IGF proceedings. Thanks.
Raul?
Another interesting facet that the Internet of Things throws up for us is the fact that the IoT will go a long way in expanding the chances for inclusion for people with disabilities. So that is, again, one compelling sort of argument in favor of it, with which we need to sort of pursue it with all the vigorousness that it deserves. Thank you.
There's a panel, I'm being told here, Petron.
It's workshop 32, exactly on that topic, tomorrow at 9 in this very room, actually.
That's what I was referring to. That's why I brought it up, yeah.
Very good. And before we go to the next question, let me also note that what Tony talked about, one of the things that I've always found that's particularly rich and compelling about the IGF is if you have issues that you don't see reflected in the limited agenda of the IGF, you're free to raise them in the sessions that could be potentially relevant to that and set the stage for the next year when that will probably blossom into something on its own. Please.
And actually, the Dynamic Coalition on the Internet of Things will have its session in workshop room 3 on Thursday, starting at 9.
My name is Walter Natris. I'll be speaking in a private capacity here to avoid any complications. At Friday at 9 o'clock we do the Internet of Things and the ethical choices that we are faced with. That was my original comment that I wanted to make, that listening to what has been presented now are topics that we're discussing for years. And at this point in time in 2015, I think we are facing a totally new world. A world that perhaps we can't even comprehend what's going to happen to us with the computational with the computational power that is being created at this moment and is going to be created in the next few years, plus all the devices coming at us. And that means that probably we will have a very limited opportunity of time to discuss this from a policy point of view, or perhaps a law point of view, or a regulation point of view, and the way that we humans want to interact with those devices. And that's a topic that I haven't heard here, to be honest. And let me say that as a private person, I'm a little bit disappointed that we have, of course, a lot of important topics, but they're more or less backward facing instead of forward facing. And that may be something, if the IGF goes to Mexico next year, that will have to be taken into account and bring people together on topics that is really going to change our lives, probably forever.
Thank you, Wout. Thank you. We open the floor for more questions and observations. You can keep your questions short so that more people can make an intervention. Please feel free to take to the microphone.
Yeah, one in the back.
Yeah,
in the back.
please.
Thank you, Chair. we have a remote participation, Mr. Punif from India. He asked for Mr. Beltran. First, how does he see discussion on human security being fusion into conversation at the highest levels, especially in multilaterals like WSY? Just a second. It's projected. Where countries see the ideas he mentioned as opposite. Second, aren't issues of individual rights and states curbing individual freedom reflective of large institutional issues being projected online? How does he envision ICT's online platforms as a way of responding to these challenges? Thank you, Chair.
Bertrand?
Thanks for the question. The objective here in this session is mostly to highlight. This is it's a long answer, so I won't get into details. What I wanted to highlight here is something that echoes basically what Paul and Byron have said regarding the evolution of the perception of critical internet resources. I wholeheartedly endorse what they said regarding the fact that this very wording has changed in perception across the 10 years, and that's one of the main objectives and results of the IGF, to basically frame and make the framing of the topics evolve in the course of time. As the saying goes, it's more a question of seeing the movie than seeing the picture. It looks like things don't move, but if you look at the 10-year span, things do move. What I just wanted to highlight here is the fact that we see the convergence of a certain number of issues that connect human rights and freedom of expression, but that also connect the personal security and trust of people when you are potentially harmed and you feel without recourse across borders on something that has happened through platforms. And that this is an element of sort of human security that is a dimension that I see emerging very strongly this year in the threats, maybe because of the environment, because of the terrorism and so on. But yes, these are moments where there is indeed a tension between freedom of expression, the protection of individuals, and the notion of security in general. And this is an ideal place to do this. Just wanted to highlight the thread.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And we can hear the rumblings of the opening session that'll start after we complete our session.
They will, of course, all be waiting for us. No, just on the forward-looking, I think it's important that we also keep in mind in every of the sessions what the future perspectives are. And for example, when we will organize the Council of Europe Open Forum, we will look into what are remedies when human rights on the internet are being abused. How do we, what do we do in the future with this? And therefore we invited Mr. Max Schrems, who will come to the open forum of the Council of Europe to basically say, well, what have the decisions, well, what do we try to achieve, what have we achieved, and what needs to be done for the future.
Very good. Next question.
My name is Omar Ansari. I'm an entrepreneur based in Kabul, Afghanistan. We have some very basic problems in basic requirements. The three things which are our problems are the price of connectivity in Afghanistan. The price of internet in Japan is less than $1 for 1 Mbps connection. It is $300 in Afghanistan. Now you compare the affordability, level of affordability of people in Japan, and then which is a developed country, and then the level of affordability of people in a least developed country. This, I think, is one of the major challenges which needs to be addressed, and it should be on the agenda all the time. We know people are going, I mean, the companies, they're going to India and they say connect the next billion, And you would see like Facebook is there, and they would invite Modi to their headquarters. But they have never thought about Afghanistan. We didn't see anything related to Afghanistan or another least developed country on the agenda for internet.org or the Loon program or some other similar initiatives. So my request would be adding Afghanistan and countries similar to Afghanistan into your agendas, because internet, as we say, it's not a luxury no more, but in Afghanistan it is. We would like that to be treated as a right. The
Thank you,
second
Omar.
thing is,
Point well taken. Thank you so much. We just want to make sure that we get to hear more voices from the floor. And I can't agree more with you. Access has to remain and is the key issue for connectivity, both affordability of data and devices. Any more interventions from the floor?
Seeing none, let me thank everyone for attending this. I know that people are anxious to get across the hall to the opening ceremony so they can get a good seat, and we want to make sure you're not disadvantaged. Giannis, a few closing remarks so that you feel like you've participated.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you are like a servant in the restaurant, you know, always looking in the wrong direction. No, sorry.
It's my training.
No, I just wanted to react to comments that the perception is changing. Actually, it's not, because things are changing in the real world. And as a result, these changes in the real world, evolution of internet governance environment is fully reflected also in the dynamic within IGF. And IGF is always, since this is a bottom-up process, IGF always will reflect the prevailing feeling of internet community at given moment in time. And that is, we see the difference in attitude, for instance, towards critical internet resources. It was indeed very heated, but for a reason. Things evolved. And I remember, I think it was a third or fourth IGF meeting where the main session on CIR was the most boring, because everyone fell asleep, because it was not anymore the pressing issue at that time. And then suddenly came certain revelations, and it became, again, very topical issue, because everyone understood that something was missing in that discourse, and so as a result we always have the dynamic which reflects the evolution and current state on internet governance environment in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with those, we have one more question here.
Yeah, actually I would highlight likewise in India we launched 8 IDNs likewise, and we are also planning to launch other IDNs in other local languages. But the thing is, what I'm afraid of, like, because .com, .net and other GTLD also having a good market, and they are having good money also. So what strategies, and it should be a part of IGF proper, there should be a section or something in future, or likewise, so that we have to plan some kind of strategies so that the newcomers or new entrepreneurs who try to build up their business in the local, for the development of local content, we can contribute in this also.
Thank you.
The point he's trying to make is that the newcomers should not be disadvantaged. Yeah.
Let me encourage everyone who may not be totally familiar with the process to reach out to MAG members and others who are participating in the formulation of the program to help them, because there's often searching for those new issues and to find out what audience may be interested in it.
And please come to session 139, workshop 139 on Thursday to talk about universal acceptance, and we
That's a
can
nice
touch upon this
plug.
topic.
Thank you, Mark. Just before we close, I do want to go back to Wind for a second. You spoke to the question of openness, and with that, there is permissionless innovation. There still exists some confusion about the term. If you could briefly address that. Permissionless innovation.
No, Permissionless.
I'm sorry. Permissionless innovation is a very simple notion. Basically, when the internet was created, if you wanted to build a new application, you could just do it. You didn't have to get permission from anyone. You didn't have to sign an agreement with every ISP in the world. You just put that system up. That openness and that freedom is vital to the internet's continued utility.
Well, let me close the session on two notes. One, to thank Subi for having organized this. Doesn't come easy. She's the one who got everyone here, including you all. We owe her a great round of applause, I think. And lastly,
I can't thank Ambassador Gross enough for doing this. Had it not been for him and all of you, this session wouldn't be possible.
And let me close by noting that we are doing something here that's very un-IGF. We're ending exactly on time. Thank you.